Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? You having a good morning, good afternoon, good evenings? How's everyone? Feeling the vibes from the music? Having breakfast? Alright, so the dungeon. So not all of these are fully finished priming. So these, for example, some of them have the paint on the back, some of them don't. Still working on that. It just takes time to dry. Most of the corners are pretty good. And it's just the black base. We're not going to be painting today. We're not going to be physically cutting any foam up or anything like that. We're really going to dive into why I'm making tiles. Because you know, I'm a scatter terrain kind of person. I can put this down on the ground and we can play on the stairs the whole game and it'll be fun. So why tiles? Tiles in general have been a staple of the genre and the hobby of this is where the hallway is and we can picture walls. We don't need to make them. Sometimes it's nice to make a wall to paint the picture, but tiles have done a lot. I know there are people out there who make massive modular set pieces and it's beautiful work. I'm a scatter terrain focused kind of person. I'm fine with making occasional set pieces as scatter terrain, and part of that scatter terrain philosophy is why I made these tiles the way I made them. So these tiles, like these corners, are magnetic. They're also very modular. The goal being is that I can lay out a dungeon very quickly. It's aesthetically tied to the world building. You know, this is not a 3-grid tile, it's a 1 piece of stone slab tile made by giants. Kobe, got home early from uni today. 15 minutes, you're gonna go play laser tag. Oh my god, that sounds so fun. But how do I lay it out as scatter terrain, right? Do I randomly, like, in the moment, think about, okay, we're in a hallway, here we go, or we're in this massive room? And in many cases in my history as a DM, that's kind of how I ran it when doing Theater of the Mind. I don't pre-make the dungeon too much unless I have a map or a build that I'm basing it off of. So my hope and what I want to do is use a random dungeon generator system with dice. And the idea being oh, you don't hear the music, do you guys? This whole time. Max. Oh, we do? Okay, great. Great. Let me know if it's too loud. the idea is we roll up to a dungeon. I roll dice. We can kind of take a break before we enter the dungeon. I can dramatically set up we enter it and stuff like that. And we take a break. Everyone goes to the bathroom, grab their snacks. I roll up dice. And those dice tell me the dungeon. And I'm probably going to spend like a few minutes this stream kind of looking for my papers. But in general, the idea is the size of the dungeons that happen on the dice correlate with the tiles that I'm making here. So no dungeon room is larger than the tiles that I have. And if it's a hallway, I can determine how long the hallway is. I can just use the tiles to visualize what the dice have told me. And it's up to me to fill it in. And it's up to the players to see what's in it. I like this idea and this philosophy, and I want to explore it in today's stream, kind of testing it out, making sure it kind of works. Because I really like the idea, principally, on the DM and the players both discovering together. I think there's a lot of fun and interesting things that can happen when you pre-plan a dungeon entirely, but I also think there's a lot of wasted time and sometimes envy, frustration, too much planning, and that getting too locked into what that plan is, and not enough improvising and playing along, which is what the players are doing all the time. So I kind of want to fix that with this system. With that being said, the music that you're listening to is made by the composer Ivan. Let me make sure I pronounce his name correctly. We were joking about this the other day. Ivan Elsasa, I believe is how I pronounce it. He's in Argentina. He's a wonderful composer, and he made the music that you're listening to. This is one of the earliest samples of the Jotun, the giant dungeon ambient music. This is the exploration track. This is the type of music that I would play with my players, or I'm even putting in the current edit of the next adventure that's coming out, is when you enter a dungeon made by giants. You hear this music. You hear the deep subharmonic hums of half giants and orcs. We're using instruments that were only available during that era, 11,000 years ago, in the world of Aeda. You might occasionally hear the sound of thunder or lightning in the background, mixed with in a electronic kind of way, to give it a little bit more of a magical feeling. Kobe, thank you so much for hanging out. Happy Halloween. Have fun laser tagging. I'm gonna look for my papers to make sure that we can dive into this dungeon generator properly. I think I know where they are, but I could be wrong. So please enjoy the music while I look for my papers. I did think it was going to be in here, or at least a version of what I was remembering. Oh. Yes, this is the thing. Here it is. Okay, great. Okay. So, with dice to go with this, what dice do I need? 10s. This isn't the formula exactly that I was remembering or building off of, but this is very similar. So this will be close enough for the tests. So we have the first thing we roll is site size. So we roll a d6 to determine the site size, which is essentially the size of the dungeon. Is it a small, medium, or large dungeon? Happy Halloween! 4. It's a medium-sized dungeon. So 8d10. These both 10s? Yeah. D6 size. Then we do rooms. So we got a 1, 6, six, 7, 8. Okay. Roll a d6 for the type of dungeon. We would technically already know this, but if we were just making a dungeon, this is what we would do. 2. Okay, room types. So we had a 1, 6, 8, 2, 10, 4, 9, and a 6. This is an empty NPC. Hazard, empty, boss, minor hazard, treasure, another NPC. There's literally only like one monster in this dungeon. Okay. Now how do I associate that to tiles? Did I want it so that a one tile, so like it's just that, and then this is also empty, and then we get to a 4, which can be any shape. It could be a hallway, it could be a room, but that would be a minor hazard. Hazard. Let's roll a d6. 2. Stuck. Locked. Barrier. Probably like a locked door. Okay. Major hazard. D6. 5. Anti-magic zone. Treasure. 2. Hidden. Okay. NPC. 2. Captive. Another one. 6. Rival crawlers. Okay. And you can see how this is helping create a story for this dungeon. We have a captive NPC in there with a hidden treasure. There's a room with a locked door, which is probably going to be right before a certain room. A couple empty ones, which is nice. Rival crawlers, which means there's a whole other group of people in the dungeon. There are no other monsters yet, but the anti-magic zone is pretty great because you can have the rivals and the main players kind of have a combat there, and you could probably turn an on and off magic, and that'd be pretty fun. Let's go to boss monster. D6. 1. Physically strong. So the boss monster list is, we got physically strong, religious leader, guarded by minions, supreme sorcerer. So this is physically strong. Just write the word strong for the size I have. Okay. So, you know, we roll up to a dungeon, I write a story for it, or maybe we're in the middle of talking to NPCs in the town and we're describing a dungeon that's happening, and when they roll kind of like lore or something, and I can roll on this table and I build the dungeon out, or like the broad strokes of this, like, yeah, it's a medium-sized dungeon. Probably what that typically means is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, roughly like 8 rooms. You know, you could give this information to players, and these are all things that you can build up tension towards. What the strong monster is, that weird anti-magic stuff is happening. People have gone there and went missing. There's a big strong monster in it. This is all good, but let's take note here. This doesn't tell me the order of the dungeon, right? This doesn't generate the layout of the dungeon. This only told me what the building blocks of the story of the dungeon are. Okay, note the position where the dice fall. Okay. So let me grab more dice, because this is asking me to trace the map on with the dice. So, oh, my head. Hope everyone enjoyed that head bonk. Ho ho. All right, I'm gonna grab more dice. Can you tell me more about tension and what do you think evokes tension? Absolutely. Have you played or read the Alien RPG? I find that game is a masterclass in RPG tension. So let's have those two dice there. So to do this dungeon, I need a lot of D10s. Good to know. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. One more. There we go. The Alien RPG, and this is really where I got involved myself into tension building and kind of the horror thriller kind of experience in D&D. Tension in a game rises when you as a player know something bad is coming. See, how did Alien word it? Alien words it really well, and it resonated with me a lot, and my brain's only just memorized the methods in which I raise tension in the game. Let's go to here. $20. All right. The Alien experience is rooted in a pervasive darkness and tension. Let's see. Sense of wonder is still needed. I don't think that's the spot I'm looking for. $207. Stress and horror. We're getting there. Here we go. Themes. Stress and horror. The question is not if, but rather when the PCs will encounter something horrific and fight, desperately to escape or give their lives so that others might do so. Fear and horror is in the very DNA of Alien. Primary tools for evoking terror around the game table are stress and panic. See page 103. I think that's just the mechanical aspect of stress in the game. Let me double check. My sticky notes. Why you betray me? Yes, that's just the mechanical aspect. I don't believe you actually need... Yes and no. You don't need a mechanic to provoke stress. But there are certain... like, I use the umbral clock as a mechanic to provoke stress and tension. Which is a homebrew that is listed in the description. You just need to introduce terror of some kind and then let the PCs interact with it while their stress levels ratchet up and their personal agendas collide. Fear of the unknown. Not knowing what you are facing is scary. Use this to your advantage and let the enemies hide in the shadows for as long as possible. Let the player's imagination do the work for you. So if you're crawling through a dungeon, you're describing things moving around. The sounds of things in different corners. Something moves off to the side, you didn't catch it, but it's in the other room now. Do you want to go look? Or do you not? And you're kind of just provoking a sense of uneasy imagination, right? Loss of control. Make the PCs feel powerless by taking away their resources. Turn off the lights. Cut the power. Make machinery malfunction. When they lose control over things, fear takes over. So this is in combat for D&D. You know, you're lowering their HP. When I worked with Sam Gorski on Son of a Dungeon, him as a dungeon master had a great philosophy about combat, and I really love it and I hold it dear. Especially in a system like 5e, where your HP for players are really high up. Shadowdark kind of just does it instantly because you're at low HP. He will not let his big monsters die right away. He will get the players down to as low of HP as possible, as fast as possible. So he's dealing the biggest hits right off the bat, dealing the most damage right away. Because he believes if he can lower his players' HP from 100 to just 10, their brains start turning faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, and they start coming up with creative ideas of how to defeat the monster as fast as possible with the tools that they have. And that is a sense of loss of control. If you're losing your HP, you're losing control, right? And other ways you can play the game, take away resources. With the umbral clock, which I can dive into further, when it strikes 0, just like in Shadowdark when you spend an hour in real time, your torch goes out, so you're running out of light. And you get disadvantages and you auto-fail in darkness. It's a little hard with dark vision, but you know, if the torch goes out and everyone's dark vision, at least everyone still has disadvantage because it's still dark. They're just not blind. Take away resources. Disarm them. Take their weapons out. Or just like in the random dungeon that we rolled, an anti-magic zone. I have a couple videos coming out soon about magic in D&D 5e and magic in Shadowdark. You can absolutely make rooms out of anti-magic or broken magic. Wild magic is built into it. Maybe the wild magic or the anti-magic zone of the room forces players to re-roll initiative at the top of the round every round, because magic is just messing up the time in the space. That's building tension, because there's fear of unknown. You don't know what's happening, but you're also losing control. I try to, if I'm doing like fear of the unknown, I try not that to be, I try to stick to a pattern, something that can be picked up or figured out, right? So if something's moving through the shadows, I try to keep it in the shadows. So if they cast light on it, they still can't see it and moved even further into the darkness. So even though it's unknown, they as players can see a little bit of a puzzle to it. It's like, okay, we want to stay out of darkness because this thing could find us and get us. So let's keep the light on. And now the light is important to them. And all I have to do is put a little pressure on that light. It's like, oh, the wind blows a little bit on your torch. Roll to see if the torch goes out. Tension rises, their heart rate goes up for a moment because something's about to go wrong. I just started watching, so I might miss it. But may I offer a suggestion? Go ahead, Jerry. Horrible choices. Put them in situations where they have to make difficult life or death choices. Will they sacrifice one to save the many? Will they risk anything for a buddy? Make them decide. So this is another way to build up tension. You know, you put the choice into their hands. Hey, do you go to the door to stop the zombies from coming in and killing probably going to kill everybody if the zombies get in here? Or do you make a break for it and leave before anyone else can leave? Do you shut the door behind you, trapping people in? Do you not? Just asking the question is a moment of tension. 2 easy tactics I use to add suspense are very simple: traps and options. While normally traps are just an HP tax, which is more effective in the middle of combat than outside of combat, because that really raises tension. But if you add sudden rolls and add something scary, the players start to get paranoid, checking every corner. Yes. Now, something to be cautious about when you're doing that or adding something to the shadows, something to be paranoid about, is you don't want them to get conditioned into that state, right? Like, okay, this dungeon's very scary, we have to look around every corner, right? You're essentially trying to play Sam Says, or Sam Says, I've been watching Dropout. Simon Says, right? Simon says, touch your nose. Simon says, touch your ears. Simon says, touch your nose with your pinky. You know, like, you want them to keep up with you, and then you want to just throw a quick fastball at them and just say, touch your ear. I didn't say Simon Says. And that frustration of like, dang it, I messed up. And then they're them trying to stay on top of Simon Says is a form of tension. Second option, the more options you give a player, the more you confuse them. Give them too many resources but little clues on how to solve the problem. There's also a thing. One form of tension I really like that I learned from Alien, and I apply it to pretty much all the games now. Shadowdark is really good for this. Is actually tracking what you're carrying. I know D&D uses weights, so like pounds and stuff. I don't do that. Absolutely not. I make it a simple, gamified thing. You're using slots or loads, something that's easy to track. Like one-handed item is a slot, one-handed item is a load, right? And you can only carry so much based off your strength score. So if your strength score is a 12, you can only carry 12 slots. Great. In heroic play, it kind of doesn't matter. But the moment the players decide to crawl through a dungeon, the moment the players decide to explore the wilderness, what they have on them matters. And those are resources. And even if it's a small thing like a compass, a pixie flies by and steals your compass. They've lost a little bit of control. They've lost the ability to use a compass in the woods or in a dungeon. They weren't thinking about their inventory, but now they are. It's Simon Says. Very similar to Jerry, what you're saying is like traps and options. When you add something that causes paranoia, just a little bit, you're causing tension. So now they're worried if another pixie will come by and steal something. Worst case, the map. Oh, this is the page. It's one page over. These are important words. Dread, terror, and horror. Obviously, not every game should have horror, but the philosophy behind these three terms, very important. Dread is the sense of something bad is about to happen. But no one really is sure what or why it's going to happen. My umbral clock homebrew in the description. This is the core tenet of it. The clock starts at 24. Every time you explore a new room, explore a few old rooms, and if you're too loud in the dungeon, you roll on the umbral clock. Roll a d6, and you subtract that number from the clock. And at 0, an encounter happens. That is a form of dread that is constantly raising the tension. I've played the umbral clock with so many people. It elevates the gameplay. It makes every choice that they make more and more precious the further they get into the dungeon. Terror. You feel terror when you know something bad will happen any moment. On the umbral clock that I use, if you land on a 4, 3, 2, or 1, you get an omen. You get essentially a preview of the encounter to come, and you get to roll a d4 to ideally change the outcome, right? If I roll a 1, the encounter happens now. If I roll a 2, the d6 on the clock becomes a d8, and it constantly can go up. Or it goes down to a d4 if you roll a 3. If I roll a 4, the clock resets. We skip the encounter. And narratively, I can describe what would have been the encounter, and they just barely miss it. That is a form of terror and dread tied together. Horror is the ultimate form of fear. This is a moment when danger reveals itself. It is the moment of climax, the payoff that the earliest stages of fear have hinted at. So, you're using the player's imaginations. You're describing things that they don't have control over. You're taking little pieces of control out of their hand. And honestly, a countdown is always helpful. In older D&D, they had the random monster encounter table. Like, every room you go in, roll to see what's in the room. There might be a monster. There is tension in there. There is. But it is never a build-up, right? There's no, in storytelling, we have the setup, catalyst, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. Random monster check every room. There is no rising action because it's not building to anything. It is either going from setup, catalyst, to resolution, to setup, catalyst, climax, resolution. There's no rising action or falling action. So yeah, I use the umbral clock as a great tool to help build tension, especially when, because it's out of my control as the DM, it's happening just as it is, and I'm not tracking anything. I'm writing down the number, but so is everyone else. And, you know, when you witness players' reactions from going from 24 to 9, change of pace at the table. Very quickly, every type of player has proven to me that the umbral clock is just nothing but fun. All right, so we did roll on this, and we figured out what kind of dungeon we got going on here. Problem is, I didn't do it correctly, because if we look here, note each die to determine the room, or the type of the room, meaning if we rolled on the D10, we rolled a 6, it's an NPC room type. But something also super important is right here. I don't know if you can see it or how far away it is from the camera. Right here, I just circled it with a pencil. Note the position of each die and draw an outline around the dice to form the sight's shape. Kane, thank you so much, for real. Sure as hell gonna check out the umbral clock. I love elements out of my control, makes it feel less artificial. Agreed. I agree with the whole rolling to see if there's a monster. I think a scary game needs to have a strong story. I agree. But rather than rolling to see if there's a monster in a room, the umbral clock says that when it hits 0, you find the monster, or the monster finds you. Or you roll a 1 on the D4 if you get a little bit earlier, right? So the clock is to determine where the monster is going to show up the further they get in. So rather than having the monster right away at the gate, which you can just artificially have, you can have, there's a monster right away there. At 0, an encounter happens. Oh, that came out wrong? I'm sorry about that. See, if there's a monster, I understand. Yes. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna re-roll this dungeon. I keep forgetting to eat my breakfast. Let's get a big piece of paper. Graph paper would make sense. And we're going to roll on this. Again, for people who are just joining, the point of today's stream, other than, you know, the tiles I've been building, is to lock in my preferred method of rolling up a random dungeon so I can use the tiles to fill that out on the table. To reduce prep time, to make it less of a biased dungeon, and to also just explore with my players. So today's really about utilizing the purpose of my tiles more than actually crafting and painting them. And the music that you're hearing is composed by Ivan Alsasa. I hope I'm saying your name right, Ivan. So sorry. Him and I have been working on original music for my campaign setting. We've made motifs for every era, and this is the first, not the first sample, but the first ambient track. It's not a finished version of the Ancient Giant Dungeons. So I'll be playing this music when my players explore Ancient Giant Dungeons. And this is built off the motif that we made. And currently, he's mastering this version, and he is then going to work on the chase track, which is kind of the combat action track for the dungeon. Are you about to do a map? You know it. But before I do the map, I gotta make sure you guys can see what I'm doing. I have a cluttered desk. Super cluttered desk. There we go. Let's get rid of my spiral stairs. We don't need these right now. We don't need my lava rock. We can move the tiles to the side because we're going to pull them out and soon enough. All right. So first things first, narratively, the players are either about to walk up to a dungeon or they are learning about a dungeon. So, what size is this dungeon? D6. 1. It's a small dungeon. Mouse. It's paperweight. Small, so it's 5d10. Interesting. So the idea would be determine the size. And then roll shape. So we're going to start with a circle, because that's where my brain would go. Okay, that's the shape. This is a 6, 7, 4, 3, 6. So, I have a note here in the Shadowdark book that I made, is tiles ? So the question I have is if we're using a D10, on top of the room type is associated to the number, should I have the number equal the number of tiles in the room as well? That's a thought. It does limit the possibilities, but it does offer a elegant solution. So, dungeon type. Where are we? 6. We're in ruins. Okay, so it's a small ruin. And we're using giant tiles. So we're gonna say it is a Jotunheim, a giant's fortress. Perfect. I love that the dice helped me on that. Okay, so room type 6. This is an NPC room. hazard. This one is a monster mob. 3. This is a trap. 6 is an NPC. What type of trap is this? 4. Sturdy, mechanical. Interesting. The Jotunheims were made in an arcane Stone Age. So having a sturdy mechanical trap, to me as the world builder, I would say that's been added because it's mechanical. Steam power wasn't utilized at the time. That would come later in the Age of Moonlight. Maybe. No, yeah, it would be later. So this would have to be something that was added later into the dungeon. That's good to think about. 6 for NPCs. What do we got? 3, so a captive. 7 is monster mob. 1, stealthy. Oh, I see. I can roll twice for trap. I understand. Roll them twice. 1. So a sturdy ensnaring. We'll keep it mechanical because I learned the difference. NPC though, it's just captive. So monster mob is stealthy warriors. Okay. 4 for the minor hazard. 2 stuck. Locked barrier. Okay. And 6 for the final NPC. I always count the dice if they hit the floor. I got a 6. Rival crawlers. Okay. So narratively, what tells me is somebody was kidnapped. Lowest hanging fruit ideas are always welcome. Someone was kidnapped by the monsters. Monster mob, which are stealthy warriors. This being a Jotunheim, we could have orcs, we could have goblins, and those would totally make sense. Among the orcs, we could go Canaan, Goliath, we can do Furbolg, we could do Bugbear. Are there more? I think those are the only 4 orcs. Yeah. So if we do Canaan, we can do, and this is completely narrative in the world setting, right? Canaan are your green classic orcs. In this setting, orcs are half giants. So Canaan orcs are green ones with red fiery veins going up their arms and through their body. Deeply inspired by a lot of the art coming from MCDM. I really love that look. And I've even flipped it for Goliaths. They are albino orcs from the north. So they have blue frost veins going up. Furbolgs are half Fey, half orc. So we can go a very Fey style a giant fortress, we can go a very frost, or we can go a warm climate, whether it's desert or lava. Bugbear, they're half goblin, half orc. Bugbear would... They're mostly living in the highlands. Goblins are subterranean. So that could be a sunken... If we did goblins in here, it can be any origin, but we just have goblins in there. Bugbear could be a leader of the goblins. So we have those options. The story that I'm using, literally the story is, let's build a dungeon that utilizes the tiles that we're making for this crafting series, the Ancient Giants dungeon set. Let's try to make and use the best dungeon generator system that fits. Currently I'm playing a lot of Shadowdark, so I'm using the Shadowdark book. And then the story, we see what is created by the dungeon generator. Simply by having a captive NPC, I have a plot hook, an adventure hook. Someone was kidnapped by monster mobs, and they were taken to, and because we did ruins as a small ruin, it's a small ruin, and because we have tiles for giants, I'm saying it's a small giant fortress. So it's probably not a fortress as much as it's a outpost, an ancient giant outpost. Or it's the remains of one, what's left. Everything else is destroyed. A lot of that storytelling comes from knowing my setting. You could do the same thing pick a D&D setting, right? Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk. You can do it in... I'm forgetting all the ones that they pulled over from Magic the Gathering, but all those are, if you know the setting, those fill in the blank very quickly. About rival crawlers. Want to make their way to the captive NPC. They know the NPC is there because they caught them. Silent warriors made their way in while the crawlers were out. That's also a possibility. So rather than being kidnapped by the monsters, they could be captive by the crawlers, the rivals. And then the monsters come in and occupy the space, and they're kind of a problem. So I'm gonna make some hallways. I'm gonna connect rival crawlers to minor hazard, from minor hazard to monster mob, from monster mob to trap to captive NPC. All right. The rival crawlers are going to be disguised as fellow adventurers who need help. Okay, so the rivals ask players for help to save the kidnappee. And the kidnappee could, the quest for the kidnappee could come already from town, right? Where someone mentions the noble's heir was kidnapped, and we saw them go to the woods this way, right? Open slate. We don't know the details yet, but that's what we know. The players are probably going to describe what the kidnappers look like and stuff like that. Black hoods, black robes. We can say the rivals don't have that. They left their gear in this room right here, where the monster mob has now occupied and taken their camp. think the opposite rivals don't ask for help. Well, the reason why I'm saying they ask for help is that the rival crawlers are at the entrance, and they're trying to figure out a way to get back in, because the situation's gone sideways for them. The players wander to this spot and see them, and the idea is that they trick the players to help them get through to the captive NPC. And then the rivals betray them. That's my thought. Or it can be, it can be that they want to save it first. Obviously, they want to steal the captive and get it out of there. Because 1, they're dealing with monster mobs. 2, they're dealing with player adventurers. So things are going completely wrong for them. And if they can get the players to help them get in there, they can let the players deal with the monsters as they hurry on to get to the NPC. This is really why I like this kind of small table rolling stuff. It really can just make a one-shot adventure really easy to prep for. So we have this story. My concern is, how do we determine how many tiles we need per room? This doesn't determine that. Six tiles. What? The D6 that I had to roll for the site size, small, medium, or large. There's something interesting there. If I could tether the tiles to the rolling for the size, that would be helpful. So we rolled a small dungeon. Or is it I don't know if it should be the numbers of the room type, because that means a 1 or a 2 is always empty, when in reality a 1 or 2 could be a great combat situation, and a room with a 10 is always a boss fight. So let's move this to the side a little bit, play with our tiles to kind of feel it out with our hands. All right. So let's go with the number of the die that was rolled that established the type of room. So the first room where we meet the rivals, which could turn into a combat. Or we could have the rivals be fighting a couple of the monsters from later, right? To help establish what's in the dungeon. That could help explain how big this room is. Cool. This, and we'll do a dotted line that goes from 6 to 7, while the solid line goes from 6 to 4 to 7. So minis. Okay. We're gonna use these brass looking guys as some rivals. Here we go. 4 players, 4 rivals. For the players, right base ones. Great. Players show up. And this is a tight room. It's 6 pieces. I don't count the corners as pieces. I count them as just kind of architectural add-on. There we go. So we have our first room. Let's say they're fighting. Let's have some fun, right? What elemental? Because I described the elemental energy of giants, right? Would you say this is a frost, fey, or warm climate giant dungeon, right? You guys let me know. And I'll grab the right monsters to match. You guys choose fey, cold, or warm. I have monsters to match. I want you guys to choose. Alright. No one chose, it's fine. We're gonna go, let's just roll for it. 5. That's going to be warm. So, they are magnets. We're gonna have one of these guys. A little fire elemental monster. Put that there. And as decoration for the set, we can put lava rock right there for fun. So the players show up. We have rivals. They're fighting this fire elemental. And a great trick I've learned to fool players. You can't do it every game, but you can do it very more often than you think you should. Players will always help those that are down, those who are being put down. So you could have the bad guy being defeated by the good guy, and the good guy will come off as the bad guy, and they will save the bad person. If a bad guy looks hurt, they will help the bad guy because they don't know they're the bad guy yet. It's just a person who needs help. So we have the rival crawlers, these 4 boys right here, and gals. They are fighting this fire elemental. They show up, they see them. We know the story, right? Or the plot of the adventure. They will want to use them to get through. So they ask for help against a monster, a literal monster. They jump in, they'll fight. This thing disappears. And we'll have a social scene. So I'll probably have this monster is going to last at least one full round. I've learned when you have one monster and it's a very weak creature, don't actually use hit points. Unless you have many of these, because when you roll initiative, you want everyone at the table to at least throw one punch. Or have one choice, one option that they do in combat, right? I have run a handful of games where that's not the case, and I've learned my lesson, where we roll initiative and we don't ever really get all the way around the table. Somebody at that table is going to feel left out at some point. So to avoid that, I often recommend if you have one weak monster, let them survive a round. It's a pretty solid move in my opinion. So this is defeated. They talk. Now I did write solid line, so we can say this direction will lead to a room that has a stuck door, basically a locked door, a way that they have to figure out to get through. I will say if they explore this direction, that's under the microphone, where we had the monster, they can probably find a secret tunnel to crawl through to get to the monster mob and skip the locked door. So let's take them out. They all agree to move forward with each other. Maybe I wouldn't, unless one of these guys rolled a critical failure or the monster rolled a critical success, probably wouldn't kill any of the rivals, so that way the final fight is still big. Great. The next room is the 4. Let's see if the tiles work with that. Take the corners off because they're just decoration. 4 tiles. That feels like, that 6 felt like a good size room, honestly. I was kind of shocked. So they come into this 4. And let's just kind of, there we go. Let's make it a little bit more interesting shape because it's such a small number. We just went from a big boxy room. This doesn't have to be a big boxy room. The players are here. The rivals are with them. And we need a big stuck, locked barrier. So this narratively would be where the rivals originally got stuck. Like they would come this way, and they're like, well, crap, we can't go back. Or we, like, maybe the monster mobs locked them out, barricaded it, something like that. Because I'd like the idea to not be just a locked door. But then again, it's a ruin. That's the narrative, right? It's a ruin. So there would be a giant door that they could shut, barricade, and lock. Alright. Even though I wish it wasn't a door, it makes sense to be a door. So let's grab a door. Got this door that I painted a while back. We can put that right there. We have the two of the rivals go in. And here's, I don't know if Kane, if you're still here, I'm not sure. If you're watching this later, Kane, this is a great addition to the tension conversation that we had earlier. Is if you ever can get in this type of a situation where the rivals kind of split up a bit, where two are behind, two are in front, yeah, they are, to the knowledge of the characters and the players, they're the good guys so far. But they split up, and they're technically, if you show this to players, this map, they are surrounded by armed NPCs. So even though there's no reason to be worried, I have visually shown you a situation that if I trick you right now, you're screwed. And that is going, that thought process will go through at least one or two of the players playing. They'll see that and go, okay, hold on. That doesn't look good. That doesn't look safe. Because their imagination is taking control of them. And they feel out of control because they are surrounded. So now you're ramping up the tension. Hold on, one of my things is I'm missing. There we go. I couldn't see how long I've been streaming. A lot of the boulders and stuff block it after a recent cave-in. Moving the stuff, unlocking the door could cause noise and rouse the monsters. Another thing is they've chosen to enter this new room, right? Well, let's do this super quick. Let's apply the umbral clock, because that's important for my brain. When they entered the first room, roll on the umbral clock. 6. So it started at 24. The clock was at 18. They had an encounter. The clock ignores the sound of combat, and it ignores whatever combat that could happen before the clock strikes 0. They have a conversation. They linger. They enter this new room. Roll on the umbral clock. A 4. The clock is now at 14. And now I have tension building right here, on top of laying this out. Moving the stuff can make noise. If roused, the monsters take a secret tunnel they made to circle around the party. Absolutely. They could take the secret path. So we could, if we wanted that be the case, so why they couldn't get in, that rocks fell and it barricaded the wall, the door. And we already narrated this as a magma dungeon. So I got some magma rocks. So at the table, they're seeing this. There we go. So I think I should put on here, dense rubble is actually a different thing. That's interesting. I'm gonna put parentheses on this book saying why. So if I have a reason to ask, like why a shortfall, why stuck, why dense rubble, why collapsed walls, right? So rocks have fallen, and there's a door. Since it's minor, let's just do 1. We don't need 2 things right there. They work their way through. If they're too noisy, one way I would say they could avoid the noise is when digging through the rubble, you know, roll stealth. It's a solid one, right? If they have a thief, no roll necessary. They pick the door. And the door opens. But I would say if they fail the stealth roll here, moving the rubble to get to the door, I would then have the monsters move around. And if the monsters, stealth warriors, so they can't be elementals, they gotta actually be warriors. Looking at my minis. I got some cute little green goblins that can help with this. Alright. So let's roll a... We got 8 characters, so let's roll a d6 and see how many goblins. Okay, 1 goblin. We'll have 1 goblin show up behind them. They move the rubble. The thief, so if they would have succeeded the stealth roll to move the rubble, I would have had them, you let the thief automatically unlock the door. No roll needed. But because they failed the stealth check and the monster shows up, what I would do is run initiative. And this is another way to add tension to the game, is I would run initiative, and the lock has a health bar, an HP, and the thief has to roll essentially lock picking, and their lock picking can be counted as damage to the HP of the door. So let's say they have a so let's say the thief, you know, you're going to roll a d20 because you're a thief.
What are you doing?
Trying to make sure I understand how to use my tiles with a dungeon generator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in that, there's a story built in. So we have, they're going to roll. Because they're a thief, they roll with advantage. And their bonus is a +3. All right. So we roll. We got a total of 14 +3 brain, 17. So that means the thief did 17 points of damage to the lock. Me personally, I would probably then either have it written down what the lock's HP was, or I would base it off the first roll. The first roll was 17. I'd be like, man, that's really high. I'm probably going to say the lock is 20, right? Especially with 1 monster. If we had more monsters, I might raise it just a little bit. And that's what the thief does on their turn, and we move around. So everyone has to deal with the monster while the thief is trying to unlock the door as fast as possible. Cool. They get through this room. Oop, bumped the mic. The next room is a 7-tile room. this arrow. I like this as like the way they got in. That looks nice. So 7 pieces plus some corners. So they enter the room here. This would have been the way in through the shortcut. This is the way to the trap, which is a stuck mechanical... No, it's not a stuck. It's a sturdy mechanical object that we got to figure out. So here we're going to have some mobs. So they're stealthy. Hearing the combat outside, having a getaway, the door was locked. There's probably monsters hiding. Let's see. We had one monster go out, so let's roll 2d6. 3, 2. I'm gonna say we have 2 archers, 1 mage, and we'll do 1 guy with a sword, 1 guy with a spear. All right, and they're all hiding. This is, I would go even further, but the camera wouldn't support it, but I would, you know, make this a 3-dimensional dungeon with like my scaffolds. So I can put the archers up here with a mage while the fighters are hiding down here. Bridge. Bridge, put that there, and the staircase right there, and the bridge right there. So we're gonna have the goblins hiding, right? They move in, they see the scaffolds. They're going to look, search. I might put a chest in this room. Sorry, my mic's further away. I might put a chest in this room to kind of determine. In a really rough way. I'm playing D&D by myself right now. I'd probably put a chest. Chest might have a random loot table attached to it, so there might be torches, there might be rations, there might be potions, or a magical item, or a magical blessing, or a magical curse. Just have something random in there to entice the change-up thing. These guys jump down, they fight, archers are shooting down, and we get 1 spellcaster shooting magic at them and probably increasing the defense of the goblins. Cool. Players get through. I would actually say there would be an old set of stairs that was here, but it was destroyed and ruined, and the doorway is actually up. So they would have to climb up to just get to the next room. So the door would have actually been laid out to be here. So that way the players can see, okay, we have to work our way up to get through here. This is a very just slapped together using modular tiles, relying on the number that I rolled for the room type is pretty great. And then using my modular pieces, just slapping it together. This is a very nice dungeon room, just saying. And then that falls, and everyone dies. So they get through this room, room 7, and they go to room 3, the trap. Sturdy, mechanical trap. Alright, let's clear some stuff and see what that room would look like. Oh, they entered a new room, so they would have to roll on the umbral clock. 2. Umbral clock's at 12. Something happens when it hits 0. We've been having encounters along the way. So, that being said, I wouldn't necessarily say the umbral clock at 0 would be another combat. That might not be as fun. But maybe the umbral clock times perfectly with the reveal that the rivals are actually the bad guys. That might be it. If the timing ends up being that serendipitous, I let it happen. If the timing is off, you got to think of something. Whether you add a new monster to the whole thing, like, oh, there was an actual monster hidden in here the whole time. I've already established with the little fire elemental that there could be something more here. Okay, the next room is a 3. Fold. Great. So we have a 3. It can be an L shape. It could be a long hall. I think after the L shape that we already had, they went up. We can have just a long hallway like this. I think in a perfect world, I don't have the piece, but this does set the tone for it. I think this room would have been better as a stairway, one long stairway. Because the sturdy mechanical trap. The sturdy mechanical trap could have been added here by the rivals, so they can see it coming, but the players don't. In the last room against the goblins, I would probably try to get the rivals into this room, this hallway, as soon as possible. That's their primary objective, while letting the players deal with the goblins. So they would probably, because they would try to avoid the ladder on the scaffold, right? Which you just move up. You just use your normal movement. If you were to climb the side of this, I would say, oh, you're moving at half speed versus full speed using a ladder. So they would sacrifice their speed and actions to climb hastily up the side of it, to skip the ladder and run through the door. Maybe take a hit, punch or something, the goblins. That would also tell the players, you could just climb it, because I just showed them that they could do that. So they're in this room before the players. They want to, whether it's a stairs or a hallway, because I'm stuck with a hallway now. How would I run it? Mechanical trap. What kind of trap would you lay? Mechanical means either a tripwire, if it's added. It could be spikes. Spikes are typically built in though, so either you dug it out and made a pit, or you added something into the wall. A tripwire is the most like DIY. I've added a trap into the room. The tripwire can be hooked up to something holding rocks from falling down. It could be attached to crossbow, like a ballista. I like that actually. If I knew where my ballista minis were. There they are. So I like it not just because I have a ballista mini, but because narratively, if these guys were able to run in this room, get past the ballista, and there's no sign of blood, maybe I put a dead goblin, put the players in. They see a ballista, they see a dead goblin, they see a ballista arrow if they investigate in the goblin. They don't see any sign of the rivals. That is a hint and a clue that this trap belongs to the rivals, and it helped keep the goblins out, any intruders. So now they have to get around with the ballista being armed with tripwire. I'd probably have multiple tripwires. Let's roll a d6 to see how many tripwires. Minimum 1, max 5. So 6 is just going to be another 1. 5. There are 5 trip wires. So 5 dex checks for players to get through this. I would probably have the ballista be a repeating crossbow based off ancient China's repeat crossbow that they made that Europe never ever got a hold of, which is crazy to me. So there would be a wooden magazine at the top of the ballista that has 5 rounds in it. So they work their way through. We do dex checks to get through. Let's roll some dex checks. Let's see how well these characters can do. No one knows when it would go off. Instead of tripwires, make it obstacles that cause fallen debris to press more on the trigger. Ooh, that's clever. So we would roll initiative. To do that, that's a great idea. To have the environment help. I would have everyone roll initiative. And then on my turn, I would roll for the environment, for like a rock to fall or something to trip the wire, or just a wire snaps because it just snapped, right? So my turn is hazard. I would use the Oracle system. So I don't set a DC. The DC is essentially 10 or up. And the difficulty is based on whether you're rolling disadvantage or advantage. So let's say the thief goes first. Thief would likely have advantage because they're a thief. Oh yeah, they pass. That next player, they are a wizard, so they get disadvantage. Everyone else would have disadvantage because they're not a thief. It goes off, deals damage. Crossbow, I believe the crossbow's a D8. D6. How I like to run siege weapons is times 10. So 1, that's 10 points of damage. Someone could be dead in Shadowdark. If this is a first level, they would be dead. If I ran siege like that. Let's roll for the next person. Disadvantage, they got a critical failure. So I would roll it as a critical hit. 2 damage dice. Okay. Next person. They got a 10. They're good. Next person. They got a 2. They get shot. So what is that? 1, 2, 3 shots out of 5. So even if I run out of ammo, the rest of the triggers don't work. So people are hurting. They're getting through. Now it's my turn. I roll straight to see if a tripwire happens or not. 12. It does. So either a rock falls, a wire snaps, something, and it fires out. I did forget to roll on the umbral clock as they enter the new room. Thank you. 6. The clock is at 6. Crit fail, the umbral clock rolls. You know what? That's a great idea. 1. Clock's at 5. It's fired 3 times. So there's 2 more shots left. The thief goes, does a movement to get to the other side, and wants to disable the trap. They make it through, no problem. And they want to disable the trap. 18, they did. So, it's got 2 rounds in, and the trap's been disabled. Everyone can move on. Super simple. Okay, so far, the whole point of the test is to figure out how many tiles we need to use per room, and we kind of adapt what the style is of the room to the number of tiles we have, and we're getting some nice small sets. I'm kind of happy about it. The rooms aren't that big or that small. So this next one is 6, just like the room that we started in. Let's do something fancy with the set. All right. Put some corners in. Really decorate the space. There we go. Players show up. That's not a player, that's a goblin. In this room, we have a prisoner. There we go. A little noble mini. And the rivals are here too. The set is a little flat. Want some verticality to it. This has been a ruin. You know, let's put in classic like video game level design, right? You want to be teaching players as they go along. So in the last goblin room, it's kind of like a yes and in this process that I've learned. When making dungeons, and this is literally, you're seeing it live how I'm applying it. The last room had scaffolds with verticality. Great. That means this room, we need to have that too. Because we need to, 1, keep the aesthetic up, but 2, players have learned, oh, we can climb scaffolds. We can use that to play the game differently than just a flat space. We'll put the ladder right there. And we'll put the bridge right here. That's pretty great. To ruin. Okay, I'll use this. Here we go. Is this LED dead? Yeah, I gotta swap out the battery for that one. There we go. Put some fun little LEDs in there to kind of give that whole like dungeony feel. Hide one of these guys because maybe one's hiding. Yeah, and they enter this new room. They see what they see. We roll on the umbral clock. 1. Ooh. The clock's at a 4. So, like I said, serendipitous. The clock is essentially now at an omen, so it's going to offer a sneak peek to the encounter that will happen at 0. Because it's timed up with entering this room and we kind of see the rivals laid out as they are, we can say, okay, as you walk in the room, your omen is that you see the rivals do X, Y, and Z. Describe them as more malicious now. They're clearly in charge. You're now aware. They hold up their crossbows. They hold up their swords at you as they're trying. Their goal is to escort their captive down and out a secret tunnel that will allow them to escape. That's their goal. They have to get down. Woo. They have to get down. There we go. So they don't have to cross this way. They have to get down here to go out this doorway. A hidden, like, cave hole. Because it's at 4, I have the players roll a d4. Where's my d4? Did it run away? Did it flee? I'm gonna step on that d4 like a Lego piece later. Alright, let's see what the 4 is on the umbral clock. 2. So the umbral clock now goes from a d6 to a d8. So they're totally fine. Due to the umbral clock, that tells me as a DM, because of the tension system I have in place, it doesn't go into a combat. It doesn't communicate to me that they're going to attack. That means the players have the opportunity to avoid this encounter as they see fit. They can negotiate and stuff like that. And I would probably run a similar umbral clock in the background. I've been playing around with this idea, is using the umbral clock system as a patience system to help me gauge social encounters a little bit better. But they can figure this out. They can go and combat whatever. They can help them, trick them, fight them whenever they want. If they successfully negotiate, right? And they're like, great, we'll work together, we'll take part of the payment, and it's all a trick. Who cares? They've successfully negotiated their way through this. That clock, the Umbral clock, doesn't care. I will say if they succeed at it, the Umbral clock will mean there's something else. If they fail at negotiation, the Umbral clock will be rolled to see if this becomes the encounter. Like if they go to fight. Because that could be rolling once and they don't fight, and I'll be like, keep negotiating, guys. You have the opportunity. So we roll. They successfully negotiate. They're not going to fight. They're going to work together to get out and take the bounty together. One. Clock's at a 3. Okay, so they successfully negotiated. Roll a d4 because they're still in Omen territory. 3. The clock becomes a 6 again. I would describe as they're now leaving this room into a secret tunnel, which wasn't in this. So if combat goes down, I'd lay out a tunnel or like a hallway. Tension's rising. You don't know if it's them or something else, but something's definitely not the way you want it to be. Something is definitely telling you something is wrong. That gives them an opportunity to RP, to do some checks, and as they go into the new tunnel, roll on the Umbral clock one last time. Oh, that was cocked. That was cocked. Let's not roll on the tiles. 3. Clock goes to 0. So that would leave it up to me that as they sneak out of the dungeon with the rivals and the kidnappee, to either have these guys turn on them, or, you know, pull out a bigger fire elemental as like something attached to the dungeon. Yeah. So, story aside, we really tried to tie in the Umbral clock and how the dungeon system for Shadowdark kind of connects to each other. I think the tiles, based off the number that tells me what type of dungeon room it is something that is pretty nice. I mean, we don't even need to roll the Umbral clock as we did as they were escaping through a side room. With no negotiations, they might just walk out the same way they came. And that, how many rooms is that? 1, 2, 3? Every 3 rooms they roll on the Umbral clock. Every 3 old rooms, I mean. So by the time they got to the entrance, we would have rolled on the Umbral clock one last time to see if, like, a rival crawler is a werewolf, if a rival crawler, if they turn on the party, or if there's just another elemental monster, right? We would have had the idea based off what the players are thinking and communicating. Like if they're really worried at the table about another elemental. Oh, toss in another elemental. If, as they're like trying to negotiate and talk to the rivals, and something's really weird about one of them, and they all just hyper focus on this one NPC, make that NPC the werewolf. You know, you're really relying on their feedback to set the stakes of the finale, especially in a dungeon that you're rolling to build like this. So I don't feel like these are too small of dungeon rooms, especially when you think the dungeons were made by people this big, right? So this is a small room. Close the door. I don't know what's being played out there. It might be copyright, so I wanted to keep it out of the mic. So yeah. I mean, just out of that one test, I think the sides connected to the room type works really great. I think the last test would be to kind of just lay the tiles out and feel out the different sizes and the possibilities. So there's ones, there are twos, there are threes. What do we got here? This is a 6 room. Corners don't count as full tiles, they're just decorative. So we wanna, let's just jump all the way up to a 10, maybe? This is an 8. This will probably be the go-to shape of an 8, right? I mean, you can even add some corner tiles up here. Right, that's an 8. That's a sick looking room. Okay, we go to a 10. Obviously, I can make more interesting shapes, but this is a 10. This would be as big as it gets, which means I would never use these tiles. Think about that. So we could have a room that's like this. Okay. So how many tiles did I make? We got 10, 11, 12.
Go in there. Don't yell at me about it.
Cats.
Been hooting and hollering.
Are you hooting and hollering?
Why is my office closed? I have meetings.
That's right. My room is not my room. It's the cat's room.
Specifically Luna. She has all meetings all day. Her calendar's booked for belly rubs.
Belly rubs all day, Luna.
Mm-hmm.
So where was I? I have distractions, allure. 12. I was counting. So we have a 10 tile room because we're using D10s. This would be as big as the room would get. Whereas we have 12, 14, 16 total. So unless I want to use these tiles for something else, there could be offshoot rooms. I'm trying to think of ways that these tiles can be used if we're sticking to D10s. Obviously, I could bump it up to D12, right? And that means the biggest room would be roughly this big, just volume-wise. A wall could be useful at times. Little areas for monsters to hide. Oh, of course, absolutely. Especially when we are considering, you know, there's going to be like a door over here. We can assume that there are walls around here. There are probably rubble or a fallen pillar. There might actually just be a pillar here, right? Same thing over there on the opposite side where my camera can't see you. Like there'd be a pillar over here as well. Also, it being a 10 or a 12 doesn't mean it has to be a whole room. It could be a winding hallway, right? That would be wild. But there lies an interesting dilemma. Is that the dungeon, the room type tied to the size is limited to what's inside the room. So if I got a 10, it's not just a size 10 room, it's also a boss monster. And this being a giant's fortress, some hallways wouldn't just be, you know, just one pillar. Like this guy's just walking through one space. Imagine if his kind made this. They might make a hallway that's a little bigger. So right there we have a shape. question is, do we want large rooms to always be boss rooms? And only small rooms like 1s and 2s to be empty rooms? Or do we want a large room like this to kind of just be an empty room? And it's not efficient, but it is storytelling, right? If I bump it up to a D12, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Do I have the largest room mechanically when I want to use this generator to always be the boss room? Type based off the number that was rolled to tell me what type of room it is. For that test, we're using that same number as how many tiles were in the room. And for that small test, it worked really well. It'd be too predictable if the biggest room was always a boss. Right. But is that fun? Is that fun? That they see me pull out all the tiles to make a big room, and they're like, oh shit. This is the boss. And I think, you can take a lesson from Curse of Strahd as well, or Ravenloft, is the boss doesn't always have to be in this one room waiting for them. The boss can be moving around the dungeon. How would I... Presence of a big room, so the players walk into this room. Foreshadows a boss. What about it foreshadows? Because I can also look at Ravenloft, the castle. One of the biggest rooms in the castle is the shrine. The shrine is one of the safest places to be. Doesn't mean the boss fight can't happen in the shrine, but... Gets a modifier to the umbral clock. Possible. Put a tick into that. It's not a bad idea. It's just one of many ideas that could be floating around. If we had 11 and 12, well, let's look at the boss monster suggestions on the table, right? This might help clear the thoughts. A boss monster is a physically strong monster, a religious leader, a supreme sorcerer, or the boss monster is guarded by minions. It doesn't clarify what the boss monster is. But what that tells me, physically strong. That means you kind of want a big monster in here. You want a large to huge mini. What do we got? We got a huge mini? Yeah, that's a huge mini. This is a large mini. So you're dealing with something this big when we go to physically strong. This is how many tiles, technically. This is how many tiles we'd be working with if that was the case. That, when you put down the monster, okay, it's a tight space to be fighting one of these guys. Okay. If a religious leader we would have a spellcaster of some sort, which means we would want range and space to help with like spell effects. I was thinking more on the lines of using the system multiple times. After sometimes the players expect certain outcomes from the rooms. Big room, where is the boss now? Playing with expectations. Yes, so that is a form of tension. So if you, I keep leaning back and just so far away from the microphone. If you establish, and the players actually pick up on it, that different sized rooms equal different types of outcomes, like traps, hazards, bosses, that kind of stuff. One, that player would have to be playing the game with you for a very long time, going into a lot of dungeons. Just saying. If they do pick it up, it's not a bad thing, because they can, you kind of want to reward that. You know, let's say play this 3 times with this player, and the player has picked up like, okay, the big room's always the boss. Small rooms are traps, stuff like that. If it's the same character, you can reward them definitely for that, because their character would be aware and thinking that way. If it's not the same character, or this is like your 4th dungeon in a row with these players and these characters, then I would say it's time to mix it up. Maybe have a plus or minus extra tiles. I know I'm kind of trying to trap myself into always using a system versus creatively build it out. But I want that tool to be functional and available to the system of tiles that I'm making. And from that, I can always add and change things. But if the foundation is unsatisfying and not working, that's what we're trying to fix. And I don't even know if it's not working or if it is working right now. We're kind of brainstorming our way through it. If you think about it, the cafeteria or basketball court in schools are one of the biggest places, but they don't indicate a boss. I think associating a boss monster with a room size is hard. It is. I think a plus or minus on tiles makes sense. So like if we look at the thing that we ran today, we had a 6, 4, 7, 3, 6, right? I could argue, okay, that's how many tiles we're going to use, plus or minus, I don't know, maybe 2 or 4, and have that wiggle room kind of built into the suggestiveness of it. The 3-piece hallway for the ballista, that could have been, let's rebuild that. That could have been a hallway with extra tiles. So we'll take this, let's fold all these pieces up. Let's run that example. So what we ran earlier for the ballista trap room was a 3. Sneaky. So we had the ballista trap, we had the players, and we had a dead, I got an itchy nose, there we go. We have the dead goblin in there, right? Okay, the suggestion, the dungeon generator suggested 3 tiles. It's like, okay, this is what it would be. Or when we rolled for how many tripwires does the trap have? I know I rolled a 1, but originally we rolled a 5. I was really hoping for that. We rolled a 5. It's like, okay, where would the tripwires be? Visually for the players. They'd just be invisible everywhere. Or, it's like, okay, let's add 2 tiles. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can add 2 more tiles to make it a little bit longer. And the suggestion that we have is like, oh, we'll add maybe up to 4. So we can do this. And these are just dead ends, right? So they could run to here for cover, run across to here for cover, right? They could go straight. They could duck over here. They could duck over there, and then they can get in there. And having the wiggle room of, okay, the suggestion is 3. Let's add, you can add 2 to 4 more tiles to kind of complicate it. That feels smooth. So if it's like, oh, I rolled a 10 and that's going to be a boss room, I can shrink it by 4 and it's a 6. And it would feel like it could be an NPC room. And that, like, if it was the NPC with a rival, if that's what players are used to, like, oh, we're going to talk to somebody, it's like a medium-sized room. That could have been a 10, and I took 4 tiles away to make it seem like it's an NPC room. Or vice versa. I made an NPC room feel like a boss fight, just by the scale of the room. Let's read this. Have the amount of tiles be what is deducted from the umbral clock. That way, entering a large room could trigger a boss, but if the players raise the clock higher enough, then it won't. Entering a room deducts the amount of tiles it has from the umbral clock, but have success in the room's challenge, add to it. Larger rooms could lower the clock enough to cause the boss fight, but if it doesn't, then entering a small room after could, no one knows. Okay. The umbral clock, I've thought about this in the past, is raising the umbral clock. So you're going back up to 24. I've often, every time I've played around with it, I've often not liked it because it just adds this up and down, where are we? Because you could leave the dungeon and there could be 5 left on the clock. Right? What does go up and down is the dice size. And if your dice size gets to, like, let's say 20, the way to lower it is by rolling that d4 when its tensions are super high, or going into a settlement and resting. Resetting the clock or bringing it back up only if you avoid the encounter or you have the encounter has been the simplest, straightforward way that I've seen players enjoy it. So, let's see. What were you saying, Kane? So if we have a tile room, says it's a 10. Well, not the clock. The room type says it's a 10. And it says this is going to be a boss room. Okay. And I have a wiggle room of 2 to 4 tiles to either add or shrink. Yeah, you're right, Kane. The tension from the clock is the certainty that it is going down. You can't stop it. The DM can't stop it. The players can't stop it. You can avoid it if you're lucky at the end, but that's a close call. Okay, let me look at something here. Since this is a dungeon made by giants, does it make more sense that hallways are twice as long or twice as wide, right? That gives a big scale for the dungeon, an enlarged scale. Because that's also part of the narrative that I'm trying to do with these tiles, is like, hey, this was made by giants. If I was making a dungeon made by humanoids, I would still have a 3x3. And that would be enough for about, 2 to 3 people walking across it. So wouldn't it be logical to have a giant's hallway be big enough that 2 people could walk across it? So if we use the dungeon system and we accept the wiggle room idea, let's start from scratch. We want, how do we change it to make it more suitable for giants than, like, let's say an elven dungeon, right? An elven dungeon is made by people our size. So let's just roll a d10 and kind of figure that out. 9. Woo! Does it make sense to have a giant's dungeon to double the number equal to tiles? So I rolled a 9. I don't have 18 tiles, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So really, I'm using. I would need to make 2 more. But now for a giant's dungeon, I have to scale it up. Right? So a giant's dungeon is always bigger than what you would expect. So if you're used to the dungeon system in an elven dungeon, that like a room of 3 typically means like, oh, there's probably like a trap somewhere in there. You go into a giant's dungeon, it's about double with some wiggle room of them, right? We could do something like this. Yeah. Get rid of these. So technically, this is a 3 in a giant's dungeon. It's just an enlarged version. Could take out the corner. Smooth that out. There we go. I'm gonna try to bring it up for camera. So this is a 3 for giants, because the idea is double it for scale. I know that's more than double, but like if I was gonna make the 3 L shape turn for a trap hallway, you know, make it kind of double times the size. It's more of a 4 times scale. It's kind of like going from 2K to 4K resolution. It's surface area, not volume. So if we're in a giant's dungeon where the hallways are massive, that doesn't mean giants would be in there. It could still have goblins in them. But with the room being bigger, there's room for more decorative set pieces. Rubble. Do I have rubble? I should. Piece of rubble there. So that's clean. So the wiggle rooms in a goblin's castle. Well, a goblin's castle would be a giant's castle taken over by goblins, would it not? What type of traps are there? Crude, range 30, ancient, large, magical, deadly, mechanical, toxic, ensnaring. Okay, so that was a 3. It's enlarged. So the 2 wiggle room ideas, gnome castle then. We have 2 wiggle rooms. Scale of those who built the dungeon. Are they small, medium, large, right? And then the wiggle room is 2 to 4 2 to 4 extra tiles or decreased amount of tiles per room to always have a sense of mixing it up, even though the foundation is the same. Well, dwarves in this setting are descendants of half giants, so orcs, and elementals, earth elementals specifically. And in the current era, dwarves actually are the very few next to a major city from orcs called Tarka. So only Tarka and dwarven citadels use Jotun architecture, which is this. So if you're walking through a dwarven keep that's active, they would have this because it's part of their culture, and they have the big grandness to it. And the orcs in Tarka have this architecture solely because Tarka used to be a fortress that they've rebuilt to be a city. Wiggle room idea is good. Gnomes, they are descendants of elves in this setting. So gnomes and half-elves are essentially the same, but with height difference. And then half-elves evolve to humans. Half-elves are not half-human, half-elf in the D&D sense in this setting. We had elves. They magically devolve to half-elves, and they magically devolved into humans, which is currently happening in the current era where humans are emerging. So you can have a half-elven family that has a human child. You can have gnomes who have halfling children. And once you get to halflings, they're going to have halfling children. Wiggle room is a good idea, but originally trying to figure out when and where to have the boss fight. A 10-tile room is a boss room. According to the book, yes. Being too predictable, yada yada yada. Yeah, so if we had a boss room, 10, and I have a wiggle room for 4, so it could be a 14 size room, or it could be a 6 size room, and anywhere in between. And that can throw off the predictability. The reason I would go bigger is to make it more grand based off the story of the location. That's how I would run it in my head. Now this doubling thing, if I was to do a 10 in a giant's dungeon, that's 20 tiles. Do I have the space for 20 tiles? Because I play on a 2-foot Lazy Susan. Each tile, 2 feet is 60 centimeters. Each tile is 8 centimeters. 20 divided by 8. 2.5. That doesn't make sense. I didn't scale it correctly. Let's do math. Let's do real math. 4. Okay. 5 tiles across. Got it. That's how big it can only get to. Yeah, a 20 tile boss room can exist. I don't know how often I would run a 20 tile boss fight though. In the past, I haven't even used tiles. So when we went into a massive boss fight that used up the entire Lazy Susan at that scale, I don't even know I would put tiles down. I would just use the mat. I mean, like, it's the room. A 1 tile room would be annoying. Yeah, I mean, it's on the thing. It's called an empty. 1 to 2 tiles are just empty rooms. And I feel like so we have something here. Makes sense, it works. Reverse engineering. What type, the style of the dungeon? Cave, tome. Cave, tomb, deep tunnels, ruins. I think I would only roll on that if they were wandering and they were looking for something like a way into a dungeon or a way into a castle, right? Or it would be just, you guys come across this, and it's up to you if you want to engage with it. That would be the only time I use that, because otherwise I would kind of know, like, oh, we're going to a dungeon made by giants, right? That's like side quest territory. The small, medium, large. What do we have here? The small room is a 5-room dungeon, basically. That's what a small is, according to this table. So we would just roll this. Literally turn into it. So I'm thinking about that also. So I'm pretty happy. Let's confirm what we got. I'm pretty happy with room type being 1 to 10, matching these dice, and the tiles matching the room type. Give or take 2 to 4 tiles less or 2 to 4 tiles more for creative purposes. For a giant, we can double the tiles to make the room bigger. So there are 2 wiggles. I'm happy with that. Site type, cave, tomb, deep tunnels, or ruins. That wouldn't always be used, but having that at the ready would be great. So if the players want to look for another way around or something, that can help narrate what they're looking for or what they find. A boss room would very much depend on the type of boss. When the boss is a king with all his guards, then you would expect a bigger room. If a boss is a single warrior, it'd be a narrow corridor. Yeah. You know, we're thinking Elden Ring and Dark Souls right there, right? If you bump into a knight, an undead knight in the dungeon, it could be in the hallway. You okay?
Yeah, I'm spraying dry shampoo.
Okay.
So it just sounds weird, sorry.
You can also give a flat bonus base on the cultural background of the dungeon. This is true. I could just say giant dungeons add this. Elven dungeons add this. That's pretty clean. And it's okay if it's formulaic and predictable to a degree, because look at history. When we built a temple, we built temples very similar. When we built bedrooms, they're very similar. In just whenever you have an era, things are built very similar across the board. So I'm not opposed to having things be too formulaic. In that sense, ideally the room matches the storytelling fitting to the boss. This is true. The types of bosses that we have here, one more time, we have physically strong, so like a fighter. Religious leader, so like a priest. Supreme sorcerer, so like a mage or a wizard. Guarded by minions, so kind of like a group of thieves. I would say, well, that's not necessarily true, because the boss could be physically strong. It could be a dragon. Dragon needs a big room. And I think that is all based off knowing the cultural background of the dungeon. You know, or what's the history of this dungeon? It could be a giant's dungeon that is now the home of a dragon that sleeps in the treasure room. And that depends on the dice rolled to understand what rooms we're dealing with. Okay, so the system doesn't seem to be perfect for middle of session. Hey, let me roll up the dungeon, and we take a break. We're gonna go to the bathroom, and I'll figure this out. Doesn't seem perfect for that situation. It's good enough for that situation. Look how fast we laid out. Bless you. Look how fast we laid out that dungeon and how we kind of just like figured out what's in there. The D&D stamps that came out. I did not get the D&D stamps, Brian. So it's good enough to help quickly put a dungeon together. But if I rolled that dungeon the night before and had this internal dialogue like I'm having with you guys right now for, okay, story, knowing who the boss is it, and I get like physically strong, right? Okay, is it a dragon? Is it a knight? What ties to the story of the dungeon? I can do that prep work versus prep work of what's the layout of my dungeon? What's the history of it? And get my ADHD caught looking up on the internet, looking for maps, looking for inspiration of style. And I really didn't work out the mechanics of the dungeon at all. Whereas this would skip all that and it's like, here's your dungeon. Now paint it. We could do a mega dungeon style also, where two small dungeons put together, and that's what would that equal? That's actually an offset number than what the site size is, because we have 5, 8, and 12. So if we double it, 10, 16, 24. So you can make mega dungeons by just doing 2 small, 2 medium, 2 large. Okay, so that adds, you know, uniqueness off the, while also staying on formula. Having the amount of tiles somehow directly affect the umbral clock, in my opinion, means that you can leave a large room, but it doesn't guarantee the boss is there. Well, I would say I would pull off a Curse of Strahd if I had that. If the dungeon said you have a boss monster in here, then I would pull off Curse of Strahd, where I would roll for how many players there are. I would roll that many times to see what rooms the boss could be in. So we have 4 players, right? We have, let's add just let's make one of these room a boss room. Let's make this 6 a temporary 10. Okay, so we officially have a boss. Cool. Where will the boss be in this dungeon? Let's find out. We have 4 players. So option 1, room 3, room 7, room 3, So the boss could be in the boss room, room 7, and room 3. That opens up the story for a wandering boss, and that's kind of a big thing. Hi, Noel. That's kind of a big thing. There's only 5 rooms. I know. I was rolling to match the numbers. That's kind of one of the champion ideas of the original Ravenloft. Oh, thank you, Noel. Is that Strahd is never in one place. Strahd is moving around the castle. So I could have had the boss in 6 at 4, and then the final 10, and it moves through secret tunnels or runs away as it's being defeated to go to somewhere else. Or it flips it opens a door and crushes the wall behind it, and it makes what used to be a pathway to the end now closed permanently. So I could be pulling off those tricks. So just because the 10 exists doesn't mean the boss will be in the 10. It just tells me that there's a boss in the dungeon and there is a boss room that a boss fight can happen. Adjust things to fit the boss. Yeah, I would agree with that. So you use it these little details of complexity make it harder to run just in the moment, and it's better for prep like the day before. We roll up the dungeon, we find out there's a boss room. Cool, there's a big boss monster. And we roll to see what rooms that the boss could be in. Maybe I just want to find, like, in a small dungeon, I just want, like, what rooms could I put the monster in, right? Out of all the boss in all these rooms, other than just the end. A 1. The first thing. Because I don't have a 1 labeled here, I'm going to interpret that as the first thing. So the boss will happen right away. Flee into the dungeon. There's interpretation there, which makes it a little bit more complex, but it does also enable creativity, which is also important. Spending time on a boss won't be as bad compared to a regular process. This is also true. And you can also use wandering monster tables to help. If I was running a long campaign, I would make these. Absolutely. Not necessarily to roll them as we're wandering through the area, but I want to know, hey, if we're playing in this region, what are the monsters that would exist in this region? Great. If we come to a dungeon, I can go to that monster table and go, what one of these monsters would be part of the dungeon? So if we got Monster Mob, I can look at that, know what monsters to pull from to have a consistent world building experience. Let's see, what types of dungeons do we have? We have giants, we have dragons, we have elven, and this can be different depending on your setting. Giants build Jotunheims, dragons built kingdoms. The Jin dynasty, so we would have elemental.
Are they getting spoiled because it's Halloween?
Yeah, it's Halloween.
I know you're just you've been streaming longer than you normally, so I'm saying are they getting
Oh
spoiled?
yeah. I'm doing some solid problem solving.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
Oh, that was very nice of you, Noelle. Thank you. Did you even see that?
I did.
Okay. Oh, thank you also for Happy Halloween.
Yeah, the wiggle room is a big deal.
Oh. Brian. Hi, Brian.
Yeah, Brian checks in once in a while. Tiles, more.
When did you tell
more
Brian to
less.
paint a dungeon?
Sorry? What did Brian say?
I remember when you put me in your dungeon and you'll paint it. Is he trolling? That's what happens when you don't rate everything in your chat.
I don't remember that, Brian.
I was like, I don't think Brian's ever painted anything for us.
And then the wiggle room is also culture. Yeah, I think these are the 4 main dungeons in Aida. Giants, elven, dragons, elementals.
The creatures?
The cultures behind the dungeons.
Giants, yes.
Dragons.
Yes.
Elven.
Yes.
Elementals.
Yes, we just haven't actually encountered an elemental cave yet, or dungeon.
Yeah. I don't think there's any more than that.
No, in Colossus, would you say that was also... I know it's a giant's dungeon, but was it also elven? Or was it just more that there were dead elves there?
There were dead elves there because culturally...
But it wasn't an actual elvish dungeon? Like,
no, yeah.
So I haven't seen an elvish dungeon in game yet?
No, you haven't. Because the elves in Colossus fought the orcs at the Jotunheim.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're dead. Is that they died in battle there.
Yeah.
We haven't seen an elvish dungeon. We really haven't seen a dragon's dungeon.
I thought we did in Dawn of Inferno.
Dawn of Inferno, it was the Cult of Wrath that were trying to summon the dragons.
Oh, so they were basic recreators. They were copycats.
Yeah, it wasn't an original dungeon. They were digging out a cave to make a new dungeon, basically. I would say Dawn of Inferno, you probably have a closer to an elemental dungeon.
Okay.
Where it has a little bit more naturalness to it. The Giants dungeon goes to dwarves as well, because the dwarves are still current. Yeah, I think the boss isn't guaranteed in the boss room. Let's add that to the wiggle. Boss room doesn't equal boss in room. Boss room does equal boss in dungeon. But the 10 tells us the boss room, the 10 on the table tells us if there's a boss in the dungeon, so that's good. Doesn't affect the umbral clock, so we keep the tension consistent. Giants, we essentially ×2 size. Elven as is size. Dragon dungeon. So we made it back around to understanding how a boss room is more of a foreshadow or a presence than an actual boss room. And if you rewind, you will notice that I liked the idea, I just didn't know how to implement it. Now I do. Yep, now we can add or subtract 2 to 4 tiles. We have the culture, which is giant, dragon, elven, elemental. Boss room, not a guarantee. Oh, and then somehow gotta add undead into the mix. Somehow. No, I'm writing it just off camera. Undead equals umbral. So figure that out. Because the umbral can connect to any of these. Okay. So if I was to do a 2 times dungeon for giants, and these are giants tiles, right? How many tiles do I have? 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? 10, 12, 14, 16. I would need to take 4 more to be able to make a size 20. I don't need a size 20 because I can just say the whole room is that big. It's 5 across, 5 this way. Would be the whole battle map, the Lazy Susan that I use. Okay, so if I wanted to have a Giant's 10 or a Giant's 9, which would be 18 to 20, I would just not use tiles and I would just have the Lazy Susan out and be like, it's the whole room. That would save me so much time. True. Unless you're in an arena. Well, you could also, you know, be the function of the building. If we're rolling this up and the boss is a ancient giant religious leader, that means the main boss room is likely the main temple room, the main shrine room. Probably a sarcophagus is probably in that room. There's an orc priest trying to resurrect the giant and that orc priest is a religious leader, because their goal isn't just to be in the dungeon, right? They just, oh, we just chose to be in this ruined keep. You let the boss be able to tell the story of what the boss room is, and then you zoom out what was the dungeon. was this a small church? You know, I could do a small dungeon with a 10 and roll religious leader, and now that dungeon is a small ancient giant's church or temple or shrine. And it doesn't have to be a mega fortress. But also, let's say I roll up this the night before, and I get that boss room and I have religious leader. And then I think about the context of the adventure so far, and religious leader doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's like, oh, we kind of been building up for this like supreme sorcerer, like wizard lich battle. Like that's kind of what all the players are expecting, because that's what they've been interpreting all the clues. We'll swap out religious leader for supreme sorcerer and go, okay, this boss room has to be like lich sorcerer kind of vibe. But the point being is, you don't start there, right? I've already gotten all the rooms of the dungeon figured out with my dice, and I know the tile numbers that associate to my tiles that I'm making, which is now leaped in saving time. I don't have to worry about how do I interpret the size of this room. No, six tiles. Boom. I can grab my tiles in my prep and be like, what's the shape of the room that I want to make, right? It could be this. It could be this. It could be that, right? I could figure that out. And then once I see that, it's like, oh, let's clean that up. Cool. Oh, it's a giant dungeon. Does this look cooler if I increase the scale? Right? And if it doesn't look cool and doesn't work, shrink it up maybe, or just leave it this big and put a bunch of rubble on it and like, oh, you can't even go over there anymore. I've played, and a lot of this is to solve problems that I've experienced as a player. I want each room to matter 90 to 80% of the time. And I want it to be consistent in a sense of gameplay. My players get used to my traps. If I run the same trap, just slightly different, 3 times in a dungeon, that's a good thing to me, because my players experience the first time what the trap is. Second time, they try to exploit it because they understand it. And the third time, they have usually the most creative solution to get through it because they've done it a couple times already. And it can get kind of funny at the table. So, run it through our head. We roll/determine what the culture of the dungeon is. Is it a giant, dragon, elven, or elemental? There will be times to choose, times to not choose. Then from there, we roll the size. Is it small, medium, or large?
Can I have an LED light?
You want another of my LED lights?
Yeah, since you have so many. Thought it was next to it.
It was, but I've had to hide things from the cat.
Oh yes, they are monsters.
There we go.
Do they all just have batteries?
Yeah, they all have batteries. And great thing, there's replaceable batteries.
Nice. How do I turn? Just twist it.
Twist it and so it tightens, and that'll turn it on. You don't have to push it. Just one way will tighten it, one way will loosen it.
How do I turn it on?
Keep going. There we go. Let me see if it just needs to be turned on. Oh, you didn't go as far.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So culture, size, maybe type, I think, because it's cave, tomb, deep tunnels, ruins. That's a maybe, because I might know what the dungeon is going to be. If I don't know what the dungeon is going to be, I'll roll on the type. Culture, size, type. Then we roll the room types, and we roll the details of those, and from that we work out the story that connects all the dots. Great. Then we grab our tiles and build out the floor plan before we play. And we go, okay, that's kind of how it looks like. If they go in this room, what else do I want in here? I can put a pillar here. I can put a rubble or a skeleton here. Okay. That alone is so much that gets done very quickly, and you cover a lot of bases that players will be very satisfied with. Very satisfied. Okay. That covers a lot of details. What it doesn't cover, what it doesn't cover, the site type, whether it's a ruin, a deep tunnel, tomb, or cave. If I change that table, site type, to, if I change the names of this a little bit, so instead of room type, room theme or something, site type should be based to room, not to the whole dungeon site itself. Or the room type should have a version of this. So I can look and say, okay, we have minor hazard, stuck, locked, barrier, right? So we had a minor hazard, we rolled, and we figured out it was stuck, locked. Cool. I should have a table in here that I roll that tells me, is it caved in? Is it mechanical? Is it a room like a tomb where you'll have history written on the walls? Is there a secret tunnel out? Like just a detailed table, basically. Are there boxes? Is there loot crates? If I had one of those tables on this as well, as just like a detailed table, I would roll the shit out of that table for prep, filling up the rooms. I think that would do a lot. Okay, so let's make a note. So first step, culture, 2, size, 3, 3 is site type, but can skip that whenever I want. 4 is room type plus wiggle. 5 room type detail, and then 6 room bonus details. Okay. I think that's a good 6 steps that would help me run the dungeon. Danger level. Danger level is a specific thing that's in Shadowdark's core system. I technically get to ignore that because I use the Umbral clock. Last I read, the Umbral clock allows me to skip that, but I want to double check and see if that's actually the case. I think it's under crawling 84. Or 110. Let's go to 110. No, that's just the lights. Set the tone. Okay. So the next one down would be crawling 84. Random encounters, 112. Yes, here we go. So in Shadowdark core, how often do you roll for random encounters? If it's an unsafe place, you roll every 3 rounds. Risky, it's every 2 rounds. Deadly, it's every round. So yeah, I'm right. The Umbral clock replaces random encounters that way. The deadlier the dungeon, you could argue, would be a larger Umbral die. From unsafe being a D6, risky being a D8, deadly being starting at a D10. That covers the basis there. And then we have starting distance for monsters, activity, what were they doing when we found them, and if you wanted to make a charisma check instead of a fight, you can figure out what the reaction is. Traps. Here's a list of different types of traps. Could have used that. Yep. Spikes, javelins. But the traps also have to make sense to the dungeon. Cool. This was a very productive stream. Normally I craft the dungeon tiles on these streams, but since we are making a modular system that in my mind, I wanted to be able to reuse very quickly, and I wanted to use my tiles as a method and a tool to make DMing more efficient for me. I'm really happy that we spent, the last 3.5 hours focused on how does the random dungeon generator work using Shadowdark, because that's the tool that I had. I remember having a different one, maybe like a beta version of what's in here, but this worked really great. We came up with some wiggle rooms, or wiggle rules to help. We laid out a step workflow that works with these tiles and a way to think through it. We ran a test version through it. A hypothetical one, not a full game. And yeah, I feel like the system works really well. The tiles are going to work well with the system, and I think this is a good foundation in helping make setting up the rest of the crafting project for this dungeon set be efficient with the way that I want to lay out a dungeon. And it's obviously I can customize it and make it more unique if I'm doing a long form campaign. If I'm doing a short one shot this weekend, the whole procedural setup works great. If I'm doing a West March style game, the procedural helps so much. Because this is not meant to do all the work. It's meant to get you to thinking the creative stuff. What else is left? What we are working on the rest of this dungeon project. We are working on finishing painting these. So some of them need to continue to be primed on the back and then get colored to look like a iron cement mixed with meteorite look. This is a prototype of a tower, or not a tower, a pillar that would be found in these dungeons. So we have a general idea of what the look will be. One of those LED circles that I handed off will go in the base of this with an acrylic tower in the middle. So that'll look very nice, and that helps the tiles be flexible to kind of different terrains, because I can turn it to green if I want it to be in a forest. I can turn it to blue to be frost or red to be volcanic without needing multiple versions of the tiles. So that's something to expect. Probably start with making 2, hope to make 4. Then there are 2 major variants that I'm going to work on for the tiles. One is the umbral tiles. I know we've been talking about the umbral clock through this episode or this stream, but the umbral is an actual place in the setting. It's the Shadow Realm that's upside down, the mirrored necrotic dead version. And I have mechanics in place for players to be walking through a dungeon and then go to the Shadow Realm version, and we have a crazy looking necrotic version painted slightly different. Need to make some stairs, both spiral and straight. Those are going to be different in the umbral than they will be here. This version would be foam base, while the umbral would probably use a lot of Halloween toy bones to build it, because it'd be rebuilt and restructured like that. We have to make archways, one archway really, just one, don't need more than that. Archways and bridges, so that way we can have some nice verticality to the dungeons. And they gotta work with the tile system laying around. What else? Archways, pillars, stairs, straight stairs, spiral stairs, umbral alt tiles, the umbral alt tiles is not the priority. I should mention that. The priority is getting one set done. Because giants, there are cloud giants, I do want to experiment with making cloud tiles so we could have a cloud dungeon. I don't know if that's going to work, but I want to experiment with like a couple ways to see if that can add value to it. And then we have to take the prototype that was created a long time ago, the floating island, and make a multi-spinning floating island core room for these dungeons, because giants were the creators of arcane magic. They built in the mountains, in the sky, in the volcanoes, under the sea. So I want to make this crazy large rotating floating island setup that could be a proper boss room if you were to actually get a kick-ass boss space for a giant fight. Perfect for mages as well. So, next stream's going to be on Sunday morning, roughly at the same time. Right now it's 11 a.m. for me. So at 7 a.m. to /7:30 a.m. is when I pretty much start streaming. Stream about, I think today's a long stream, 3.5 hours. Normally I stream for about 1 to 2 hours ish. So, Jerry, thank you for hanging out with me. Sneaky, Kane, you guys have been great. Good bouncing board of ideas. Noel, thank you so much for the donation. Kobe, thank you for starting out the stream strong. Jago, always good to see you in the chat. Brian, hope you're doing well. Who we got here? Pettigrew. Greyhawk, what a throwback, right? Everybody else who didn't make it and is watching this on VOD, thank you so much for watching all the way up to this point. I hope you enjoy the music. The music is custom made. It's meant to be the music of the Giants. It's an exploration dungeon track. Made by Ivan Elsasa. I think I said that right. Ivan, if you watch this, I'm sorry. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Appreciate it. I'll see you on Sunday, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, evening, and of course, good night.
Happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween!